What you're looking at here is my working screen on DaVinci Resolve, and we're looking at some test shots that I did while I was attempting to optimize the 5D Mark III for pointing straight at the sun. In the scene, obviously you can see the sun, and in the foreground is a beautiful collection of transparent fungus that I found while I was walking on the trail in my forest. And I thought, well, this would be perfect as a foreground subject with the sun in the shot. And as you can see, it looks kind of nice, but there are some problems. If you look first of all at the sun itself, on the streaks, those are side effects from the aperture blades that are creating those streaks. And it's a pleasant enough effect, but if you look at where the pure white, extremely overexposed area of the sun gives way to those streaks, you can see that there are some nasty vertical lines in that pinkish, orangish area. And another thing to look at is the lens flare. As you can see, there's a blue dot, a red dot giving way to orange and yellow and white, and then very light blue. And if you look in the area between the white and the blue, there are a lot of little single pixels there. There's a distortion pattern there. This frame was shot at ISO 200. The next image is also ISO 200, but this time with my register hacks in place to optimize the gain structure. And as you can see, both problems are basically gone. Next, we go to ISO 100 of the stock Canon again. And as you can see, those vertical lines aren't as bad now, but they are still there if you look carefully in those streaks coming off of the sun. But if you look at the lens flare, again, there's that really nasty artifacting with those dots all over the place. And so now we go to the last one, which was ISO 100 with my registry hacks in place. And again, you can see that there are no more problems. And what's more, and this kind of makes sense because everything was still the same in terms of the exposure level and the shutter speed, but the exposure is slightly lower as a result of optimizing the gain structure. And so the flare around the sun is smaller. If I switch back to the shot before, which is the same ISO in Canon stock mode, you can see that the flare around the sun is larger. Unfortunately, it's not in the same spot because this was all done handheld by me. But if I switch back, you can see that it is indeed smaller. So the way that this works is the stock Canon settings are very, you would say conservative, but it's kind of a double-edged sword because it's conservative in terms of making it easier to use the camera, but it's extreme in the way that they have set the gain structure because it's actually, let me switch to the stock Canon frame again, it's amplifying it too much and it's allowing it to clip far too strongly. And there's no benefit to this. The only let's call it safe aspect of that is that it just makes it easier to always have as much exposure as possible. And I suppose that's potentially better for careless users. but this is not a beginner's camera, so it doesn't really make a lot of sense, does it? And so by adjusting the actual amplifier inside the camera that's after the sensor, that's basically just adjusting the amount that it's being amplified. It's a preamp. It's just like in the audio world, a preamplifier is used to increase the level from your microphone before you actually record it or just run it through the mixing board or whatever you're going to do. It's the same thing here. It's pre-processing the information from the sensor before storing it on your memory card. And so by optimizing this, by reducing the excessive gain that is being applied by the stock Canon firmware, we can improve these problems and at the same time improve the dynamic range and the noise level. Now, you won't really be able to see the difference in noise level in these images because I have already graded the footage to my taste, and I wanted to have a very filmic look with the really blacks, and everything is nice and punchy and vibrant and beautiful. But if I was to grade it to preserve as much of the detail in the shadows as possible, then you would begin to see noise creeping up in those dark areas. And the noise is much stronger in the stock footage. I'm not going to bother showing you that because it won't be preserved by YouTube. They degrade the footage far too much. But I was just so amazed at these other benefits that I've been showing you that I really wanted to share this with you so that you could see that. Because it's just shocking to me to see the difference in those horrible dots in the lens flare that simply disappear when I switch back to the what my friend Tim and I call TNT version, which is simply, in this case, in the frame that I'm showing you right now, which was done at ISO 100, only requires changing one register to do this. And so I'm going to now show you these 4 clips actually playing, and I've only isolated 1 second of each of them, one after the other, and they are in the same order that I've just shown you on the single frames, beginning with Canon stock 200, then TNT 200, then Canon stock 100, then TNT 100. And then we're going to go over to the camera so I can show you how this was done at ISO 100.